Hello and welcome to The Morbid Show. Today I'll be covering stories from r/detrans, a well-moderated subreddit for people questioning, desisting, or detransitioning. I will be protecting the identities of these posters since individuals in this community have been harassed when their stories have been discussed. This video's first post is titled, "I don't understand how I did this." I can't understand how it was me who made the decision to do this to myself. When I look at myself, I can't believe this happened. I wonder how the hell this much breast tissue got in my chest, and I somehow didn't see it happening. I wonder how I could have failed to realize it was happening when it did. I mean, I know it basically grew over between 2 and 3 weeks, which everyone tells me is astonishingly fast even by medical standards. But still, I should have noticed, right? That's what's crazy. I asked myself these questions like I'm trying to understand some other man who made the decision to do this. Some other man who didn't see it was ruining his body. Some man who failed to comprehend how this process works when he was researching it. Some absolute idiot that I don't understand or relate to. I feel like I'm suffering the consequences of some stranger's actions. But that stranger was me. How can it be like this? I am so confused by this situation. I know that breast tissue starts very dense and then spreads out as it decontracts, so it certainly wouldn't have looked as large when it was actually growing as it does now that it's proliferated. I know that rationally, and it does go some way towards explaining why I didn't see what was happening exactly, but I still feel this strong disconnect with who I was before this happened and who I am now. I feel like the old me died, and now I'm this person who's stuck hating himself for having ever been that person who would leave me with the burden of this ruined body, the burden of having to wait and see if it can become even a little better while months crawl by and my life rots away. From the comments, one person says, "I think you feel the way you do because it wasn't completely your fault. The culture is so approving of it, and questioning gender ideology is extremely taboo. You were influenced, as we all were. There's a reason more people are transitioning as of late." Another person adds, "I am so sorry this happened to you. You put your trust in our institutions, which are absolutely committed to transitioning anyone who has gender confusion. There is no path presented by the medical establishment to turn around. You get no support. We are living through a real-life, real-time tragedy. I can only offer my sincere condolences, my friend." The original poster replies to this comment, "Thank you. I break down sometimes. I fight and I fight to move on with my life, but when I have a night where I crash like this, what can anyone do but give condolences? It's probably what I need, really. A sense that I'm not alone." And someone replies again, "You are absolutely not alone, and there are people praying for you. Me, for example. I wish I could do more. My niece is 12 and identifies as non-binary. I know that her parents would only offer affirming care. There would be no way for her to back away from the identity. She went from a super happy and outgoing 10-year-old to a very clearly depressed 12-year-old dressing in a goth appearance, etc. The change has been sudden and shocking. Of course, her parents say things like, when she was younger, she was more into masculine type things, etc., as if this would justify a later disfiguration of her body. There are many ways to be a girl. The whole thing is absolutely nuts, but so sad. I feel for you." Now on to the next post, titled, Is anyone really freaked out by how the media/aesthetic preferences play a big role in fueling some gender transitions/questionings? One thing I've started to notice over time was that many people, including myself, found ourselves questioning our gender due to media or aesthetic preferences. It's a common story you hear online, especially if you were in fandoms, that people realized they were trans because they either identified or wanted to be characters of the opposite sex/androgynous ones/whatever. The desire to transition is often combined with pre-existing aesthetic preferences in real life, like enjoying cosplay as opposite sex characters or a general dislike of presenting stereotypically of your natal sex's fashion expectations. This also manifests in their consumption of pornography or erotica because they end up fantasizing about being in sexual scenarios where they are the opposite sex, or they are witnessing characters of the sex opposite to theirs having sex. All of this is best summarized by the screenshot I took from a detransitioner's webinar. Some Tumblr user named Pretty Gay Rose says, "Something that bears mentioning. I get why we need to shame straight girls who fetishize men-loving men ships, but to any straight girls who consistently relate to or resonate with men-loving men dynamics on a deep level or see themselves in queer male characters, if by any chance this post from a tiny blog crosses your dash, please take this moment to very privately consider the possibility that you might not be straight or a girl." Now that I'm quite distant from my gender hell, I've come to realize that this idea is actually quite unusual and I dare say insane. The belief that your personal preferences in fiction somehow reveals a deeper truth about your gender soul is a very recent idea which has only been propagated through online fandoms. 20 years ago, if someone told you that they wanted to quit their job and become a relic-saving archaeology professor like Indiana Jones, people would think you're insane or at least acting irrationally. We understood that while fiction often spoke to universal parts of the human experience, it was ultimately distinct and separate from our lived human reality. The internet likely has blurred that line and has made us unable to separate our personal preferences from the fantasies that we often live out through the internet. We are told that certain innocuous traits about ourselves, like fictional characters we identify with or fashion we wear, are manifestations of our innate gendered soul. On paper, this sounds ridiculous and would be easily dismissed by most rational people. However, when we are so dissociated from our bodies from being online too much, or are otherwise just mentally suffering for whatever reason, how could this not be an enticing idea to make our problem seemingly go away? Now from the comments, one person says, "Anecdotally speaking, I've seen a lot of male to females/trans femme people like to project themselves onto anime women, and often their avatars feature anime women, and that's how they present themselves online. I get it. Those characters are aesthetically pleasing and diverge greatly from how someone born male would be able to present themselves in real life without backlash, and as silly as it sounds, I find myself projecting myself onto those characters as well and wishing I was like them. Problem, however, is that it's an exaggerated aesthetic that isn't realistic. Those characters, both men and women, are typically drawn to be flawless and aesthetically appealing in a way you just can't replicate in real life. It's not really healthy to compare yourselves to those characters, or set them as your goal because they're an extreme that isn't representative of real life." Another person says, "I was in queer-heavy circles a lot, and most of the trans people I knew were trans women with deep circles of trauma. I was always wondering why they all dressed in a very, I don't know how to say it, 2011 Hot Topic emo/catgirl way. They were all adults too. Every opportunity they had to act sexualized, they would. They were all really thin, and started wearing things like fishnet gloves, punk plaid, and you can't forget the cat ears. I've been trying to think of why they do this, and I realized all of them are, in some way, shape, or form, anime fans, furries, or both. And not all of them knew each other either. They posed in really suggestive ways on their socials starting the day they came out. I'm just wondering what this all implies, because I know they're not the only 4 trans women doing this. A person replies to this comment. In Twitter, you'll see tons of trans people using an anime profile pic of their favorite character of their preferred gender with the trans flag as the background. I think it speaks for themselves. And the original poster replies to this comment. It's kind of terrifying to see that they all have the same kind of profile. They claim to be challenging the system, yet they all behave the same way. Someone else comments on the original post. Honestly, unsurprising. Now that we know social media algorithms are designed to lump us into increasingly extreme rabbit holes based on our shared interactions. And another person adds, I love how they ignore this wild possibility that maybe straight or lesbian or bi girls enjoy men loving men because they can finally disconnect from toxic hetero stories and just enjoy themselves. And the original poster replies to that comment, or that seeing 2 pretty guys getting it on with each other is hot. Next post, titled, My dysphoria went away once I went to a therapist. I'm gonna share something personal here, so stick with me. About a year or 2 ago, I got sucked down the trans rabbit hole. Someone had commented r/egg_IRL under something completely unrelated, and I wondered what it was, as I liked the r/me IRL, and I was expecting a stupid subreddit like r/bread stapled to trees. So I started trolling through r/egg_IRL and looked through some of the posts. I thought they were a bit funny, so I subscribed to it. Over the course of a week or 2, I was a frequent user. I was going through a really rough time in my life. I had just switched schools and didn't have a lot of friends and people to talk to. The subreddit and coddling convinced me that all my depression and issues were because I was born in the wrong body. Taking advantage of perfectly normal traits, like playing female characters in video games sometimes and playing dress-up in a fairy dress when I was a kid, to convince me that I was transgender. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. I began to use Reddit almost exclusively for trans-related subs. I got hug-boxed in and eventually stumbled across r/trans DIY. I had been convinced I had a ticking clock as to where the damage done to my body by testosterone would be irreversible and I would be a bearded man for my whole life. It all fell into place. I could solve all my problems and be happy if I just took 100 milligrams of sorry, 100 milligrams of bicalutamide and 4 milligrams of estradiol daily. Now, being a fool with more money than I knew what to do with thanks to good financial habits, I bought drugs from one of the recommended stores, and a few weeks later, with no customs issues or anything, I had a package at my door. So I started taking them, and for about 2 weeks I felt better. It was around this time I heard about evil, bigoted TERFs, and I scrolled through some of their subreddits. Namely r/gendercritical and r/it's a fetish. They created a tiny seed of doubt and uncertainty in my ideas and convictions. Anyways, after about 2 weeks, my eyes turned yellow from jaundice. I went to my doctor and told her everything that was going on. She was horrified about how easy it was to just get these drugs. Now she sent me to get blood tested and I had elevated levels of some enzyme or something. Turns out I had liver toxicity. Nothing to worry about, but I definitely shouldn't be drugging up on these, especially not without close medical supervision. So, my plan now was to get a recommendation from a therapist. I was lucky and didn't get a gender therapist. I got a serious, real deal therapist. One who also works with murderers and pedophiles on weekdays and does just normal therapy on weekends. She, along with the guidance of r/GC and r/IAF, forced me to confront the fact that I wasn't actually transgender and I was falsely attributing my issues to it and deluding myself into thinking I was. Along with a pile of other issues ranging from issues with my father to a serious pornography addiction and some anxiety and depression along with some heavy stress. I went into it with the initial plan of making fun of TERFs and getting a recommendation from a therapist. I can happily report now I have absolutely no desire to ever transition, and now I'm free of any liver toxicity or pornography. r/EggIRL and other trans subreddits are a grooming tool for young people in hard places in their life. It offers them a perfect solution to their problems, and all they need to do is take the magic cancer pill. It upsets me to think of the young people pouring in there every day who don't have the support structures I do. These kids need help. Now from the comments. These are hard things to confront. It's much easier to pretend the people raising possible and other confounding factors are evil. It's much easier to be surrounded online by online personalities that appear to be girls all cheering you on. I hope you were able to take some things from the experience, though. Mostly the ability to be yourself. If that means signing texts with emotes and exclamation marks, or being submissive, or being cute, or having fairy lights, or wearing things you like, I hope you were able to find that anyone can do those things. Another commenter says, I hope to find a non-gender affirming therapist. Crying emoji, laughing emoji. Another person says, what scares me are countries where it's conversion therapy and illegal to make someone not transition. Now to today's last post, titled, Vilification of Parents. This isn't just me, right? I in no way come to defend transphobia. But one thing I just can't let go of is the trans mom and such tropes. That is, older trans people, usually male to females, would have a very non-parental mannerisms online. Mostly infantilizing and being very weird and overly sweet towards the questioning young. I, more bad luck than anything, was never a direct recipient of this sort of behavior. However, I remember feeling extremely envious of seeing the type of trans/non-binary parent always here for you who had place for you to go if your parents disown you, or things down on that line. Abusive transphobic parents could be many things. They were violent, they were restraining, and then they were invalidating. Suddenly, transphobic parents could be those who think it's a phase because of being surrounded by such people, which sometimes is the case. Parents who have any medical knowledge and know the risks, or parents who, like my own, have seen the future of that path more than once. In the hospital's mental health day/outpatient clinic halls, taken on gurneys to do even more surgeries, and hear from surgeons and nurses about all types of procedures they had to do, and cases are sometimes just downright depressive. I had such a parent, and I used to fight them, tooth and nail, that no, these cannot be bad, that so many people need them and are refused, yet they're only 1% of the population and a marginalized minority who are dissuaded from doing what's right for them and their dysphoria. Yes, the cognitive dissonance no longer escapes me. Or rather, I don't escape it any longer. Which leads them to suicide, etc. My parent would always voice their concern that I too much online, not much wrong with that either, that I don't understand the consequences, etc. Again, all of which true. With them being so invalidating, I was too scared to voice my own wish to transition. They were so transphobic. They will probably disown me, I tended to think. Other times, I'd be more concerned with all the rejection of what I thought would be life-saving for me. But most of all, I wanted parents like the trans moms on Tumblr. I wanted to live in the countries they lived in, so I could run away and be accepted and loved. So blind I was to my parents' concerns about me, of grooming, of exploitation, of my naiveness, that I was blind to the evidence of them. So blind I thought it's what I wanted. Because in my head, it wasn't exploitation, grooming, or anything like that. It was all genuine concerns of these trans parents, listening, and making space for the physical safety of all kids whose parents are transphobic. I was sure my parents were transphobic assholes, and thus homophobic. Again, irony no longer escapes my mental grasp of the whole picture. Bad, even horrible people. I used to think of them as Nazis almost. For context here, I'm Jewish, as are my parents, and the Nazis wiped off the better part on both sides. It's not far off me, and not to mention them, whose lives were shaped by the lives of their parents, survivors, or those fortunate enough to only lose part of their family and not all of it, by living elsewhere in those years at all. I was only a teen, but I felt hatred towards my parents for their concerns. Because of their concerns, I was told and was convinced they were all transphobia. There were stories of grooming and pedophilia on the news, and now, looking back, some tactics are similar, too similar, but I did not see it. I saw none of that, not in the trans community. I didn't even think of their mannerisms and attitudes while seeing this. I was sure that I'd never fall for that because I was maybe on Discord, but I didn't play Fortnite. I was online, but I didn't talk to strangers. And I did, but they were internet friends. You know how it sometimes feels. I kept safe and far from older men and even guys around my age. I did talk to women and wished to have these trans parents, especially a trans mom, so cheerful and hugging and loving, yet was scared to approach. And this theme of fear of rejection has proven itself to help me reach where I am today. But back then, I was always so envious that some people ran away to these trans moms and trans parents, etc., what I saw as safety. I remember looking back at it all and realizing how fortunate I was, because it no longer seems right. It's much more than creepy. It's terrifying. How parents are vilified for anything other than complete following of all these procedures, paying for them, doing everything, and paying for everything to validate a child's, sometimes just at the beginning of their teens, and even younger, identity. Getting them irreversible procedures. Under-researched in addition to being risky in general, medically it's unethical to jump straight to surgery in any case there is. Not doing anything but the absolute maximum that is everything, with no hesitation, with no word of protest, of concern, has become transphobic. And transphobic has become such a wide, inclusive word. Fear? Maybe. Hatred? Yes. Concern for the life of a child? Yes. Because it's an invalidation, and thus a violation of basic human right for life or safety, just like the Nazis did. They seem to never mention they also committed crimes of experimentation on children. They attack and they vilify any form of parental concern, of parental love being also about setting limits. They are restraints. They are against your basic rights to identify as whatever you'd like. This is criminal. And it's hard not to buy it. No, to walk blindly into it. Nothing is easier than blaming your parents, especially if you're depressed. Even when you're dysmorphic. My parents brought me to this world. My parents provide food. In my case, it was allowed me to eat. Parents there, and they're as imperfect as anyone can be, but the trans parents online, they only show love because validation is inseparable of love. Validation not of humanity, not of interest, not of success, but validation of the wish to go under the scalpels for what might not even be a case requiring any scalpel. It's true that now surgeries are no longer required to be trans, but total detachment from one's previous life is encouraged. And what's easier than creating a grudge for you to hold against your parents, while building someone's trust in someone else? Being a better parent for this person, a stranger, many times a minor. It's much easier to target those whose idealism and naiveness are still unscathed from the true horrors of reality. Horrors like adults pushing ideology, pushing narratives, and encouraging a child to not only trust them, to come to their place if situation gets tough. What's tough? Tough is bigotry, it's transphobia, it's invalidation. This horror story writes itself, making the parents the villains, slowly, by making them seem violent, bigoted, hateful, and making you a victim of these abuses, concerns. Please do not take it as a praising gospel of how parents are amazing and good, and all trans parents are predatory. My observation is based mostly in my personal experience, and in things that have been weighing on me ever since I first saw how blinded I was. This person also adds, "Your medical secrecy is well kept. Don't worry. No other person who wasn't there knows anything more than Doc. How was your day, surgery nurse? We had 2 cases of plastic surgeries that I swear that I could do better than that. Case 1 could barely breathe." TLDR. Been some time that I wanted to talk about how older trans people, mainly male to females, would appear extremely friendly and fond of young questioning teens, and will come up with statements like, "My home is your home, I will take care of you instead," etc., mainly by vilifying any normal parent behavior in such situations. Writing this down, I'm also starting to wonder if it makes parents fear even more to their children's safety from these people, that they rather just go on with whatever the kid says, trying to keep up with impossible standards, only to not lose them or have them hurt. From the comments, one person says, "It's difficult. On one hand, I can empathize with an older generation who wants to protect and shield the younger. That instinct to protect and lead exists in a lot of communities. I had older friends in high school who were my confidants, providing me a safe place to run when I needed it. Whether it's the punk crowd, the rock crowd, or the scene crowd, it's somewhat common. I think the superficiality of it is the biggest red flag, though. A person lending a hand genuinely isn't going to retract it if the person changes their identity. I'm sure there are very well-meaning, loving mentor figures in the trans community. I've met some folks that are fantastic. A lot of times, parents do things to warrant vilification as well. And for many making those arguments, they tend to have grudges against their own folk and want better for the people they're talking to. This includes telling people in your friend group or online things that you could never share with your parents. This isn't necessarily malice, but yes, groomers are taking advantage of young folks' proclivity to seek out mentors who have been through what they have been going through. And these individuals need to be dealt with. It's absolutely part of the reason why transphobia is getting worse in a lot of parents, because people are afraid of these bad actors, especially given they aren't always kept in check. Superficial adults only interested in people transitioning rather than the health of the person should be avoided and chastised like the plague. And any adult that offers to replace a parent should be regarded with caution as well. Kids should be encouraged to work things out the best they can with the adults in their life, to at least try to build that bridge. The best thing to do, as usual, is to advise people to be cautious. People need to help police communities that they're in and hold folks accountable. If someone in your group is being creepy, call them out on it. If they're giving bad advice, doubly so. Oftentimes these younger folk need an ear to listen, not a mouth to diagnose. And they certainly shouldn't be encouraged to run from home to any other adult's house. Those who are well-meaning need to take care that their heart doesn't get in front of their head. Someone else says, "I find this whole discussion on how parents who don't affirm their child are evil bigot is a gross oversimplification of a much more complex problem. Obviously, there are horrible parents out there who will abuse their children regardless if they're gay, trans, or even just non-compliant. But I often hear of stories from normal, loving, and liberal parents who have concerns when their child suddenly comes out as trans. Whether that child always had a history of gender nonconformity or develops it suddenly as a teenager/adult. Not to mention if the child has a history of mental illness outside of the gender stuff, general depression/anxiety, ADHD, Asperger's, ASD, OCD, sexual abuse, etc., and it's associated with changes in behavior, hanging out in fandom spaces or peer groups where there's social pressure and influence to conform, and yet they're treated as bigots for even just having concerns for their children potentially undergoing irreversible surgeries and medical treatments. Another person says, the fact of the matter is that transition seems like an easy solution to a whole network of complex problems, especially for a teenager who's trying to find their voice in the world. And even if the kid benefits from transition, it's distressing for many involved because the person you knew is fading away and becoming someone else, at least on a physical level. I remember listening to a podcast where a trans man said he wrote a letter telling his parents to take their time to process when he decided to transition, because he knew that they needed to grieve the loss of their daughter. And that ended up succeeding because the parents not only accepted the situation, they saw that their child didn't really change on the inside. Trying to tell kids that their parents being even just concerned is transphobic is a form of emotional abuse, in my opinion. And I can see how people with creepy intentions can take advantage of that situation. And another person says, I disagree. There's obviously a line here, but some parents are genuinely evil, or are convinced to be genuinely evil for years. Case in point, my own father. He was gaslit into the idea that I was transgender because I was non-conforming from as long as I could talk. I was attracted to girls and I hated femininity. He got the usual spiel used against him where I'd hate him if I was forced to go through a female puberty. So they let me try to choose without saying anything, which just made things worse. When I finally detransitioned, my father excessively fought me and showed he was very unsupportive towards me accepting my biological sex. I'd constantly get flawed studies thrown in my face, pushed into identifying as trans again, and he'd make it about him in what did I do wrong? I supported you and I'm still willing to help pay for your surgeries. I've seen other cases like my dad too. My dad finally realized the whole thing was a farce when he confronted the person who misled him about me to begin with, and it was shown in his house that they didn't give a crap about my well-being like they claimed all those years ago. Granted, my dad went extreme in the other direction and is transparently homophobic, so I'm screwed either way with my old man. And that will be all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good day.